Okay. In the name of God, the most benevolent and the merciful, in honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to, in the presence of the system admin of this existential system. So, viewers, I do understand that, you need to fast forward of like 5 minutes. Um, just a quick note. Please take a moment to consider becoming a member. I'm trying to do this full time. So I am feeling a bit off, but when has that ever stopped me? So, dear viewers, today um, I am looking into more. I'm looking into the concept why the inaccessible is valuable. Okay, there's something for me to read. Okay, give me a second, folks. This is the first lecture of the morning. Okay, we must go forth. In today's lecture, I'm wondering about why is the inaccessible valuable? I'm trying to look into a certain pattern in the psychology of all human beings. And why is it that we want, in some sense, or why is what we don't have yet more precious to us than what we have? And there's a very interesting explanation. I have my own hypothesis, which is based on the inner realms. So I'm going to read for you what AI said. This is the purpose of the research component, and the purpose of just this lecture is not to replace, every view you have with like the view of the speaker. That is not the point. The whole point of it is to look. I realize we can look at objects from different angles, and now what I'm doing is I'm looking at subjects from different angles publicly, collectively. So, AI is given a historic passage. The development of the idea, I pretty much asked it, why is the inaccessible valuable? Across history, value has rarely been assigned to what is easily obtained. In early human societies, scarcity governed survival. Water in a desert, fertile land in harsh climates, or rare metals beneath the earth. These were not merely useful, they became symbols of power, status, and even divinity. Ancient civilizations like ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia revered what was difficult to access: gold, sacred knowledge, and restricted spaces such as temples. It says, sorry guys, just realized battery's low. Okay. As societies evolved, this pattern extended beyond material goods. During the medieval period, literacy itself was inaccessible, controlled by institutions like the Catholic Church. Knowledge became valuable precisely because few could reach it. Later, during the Renaissance, access to knowledge expanded, but paradoxically, elite knowledge, art, and patronage still remained higher value due to their exclusivity. In modern times, the pattern persists in new forms. Luxury goods, elite universities, private networks, and even attention itself operate under the same principle. What is difficult to access is perceived as more meaningful, more powerful, and more desirable. Throughout history, things became valuable not just because they were useful, but because they were hard to access, whether it was gold, knowledge, or status. So, right off the bat, it is clear that, in some sense, pretty much this whole game of life, this lecture is actually a very important lecture. It's pointing to this pattern that is fundamentally happening, like this essential pattern in the human psyche. Okay, so yeah, there was a time, and knowledge was rare, objects were rare, and in some sense, um to attain those resources would have changed your life. So the inaccessible was valuable right? Because it could advance survival. Oh, nice. Somebody, welcome, guys. Welcome to the chat section. If you have any questions, feel free to share or whatever. Anyways, I'm going to keep reading. Okay. So, just to recap, the first thing I read: throughout history, things became valuable not just because they were useful, but because they were hard to access, whether it was gold, knowledge, or status. Now, the point I'm gonna make, and you're gonna see, it's probably gonna be explained here, is that at what point did the value of the inaccessible shift from being objective to subjective or to beyond? Okay, because when you look at human beings, they are all acting in accordance to the content they have access to in their furthest reaches of their awareness. That means when I look at any human organism, I am pretty much seeing a system of information processing, but I'm seeing this system based on its furthest view on how it has processed information. It is fascinating to be a human being because simple things can change the context of how we generate meaning. Okay. Now we go to the academic passage. From an academic perspective, the value of the inaccessible is rooted in several well established principles across economics, psychology, and sociology. In economics, scarcity is a foundational concept, of course. Limited supply increases perceived value. This is formalized in scarcity theory, where goods that are harder to obtain command higher demand and price. In psychology, the scarcity heuristic explains how humans instinctively assign greater importance to things that are less available. So this is a very key thing in human psychology. It is about availability, right? But I think there's a distraction and there's a confusion there as well. Okay. It says socially, Pierre Bourdieu introduced the idea of cultural capital, forms of knowledge, taste, and access to social classes. What is inaccessible because of distinction. Similarly, exclusivity creates symbolic boundaries. Access. So, folks, I don't know how much of it you heard. It should have been connected. I was reading the academic passage. It's summarized as such: academically, we value inaccessible things because of scarcity, social status, psychology. Our minds and societies are built to see hard to get as more important. So, guys, there's something very important here. Okay, we're trying to figure out. Imagine me. I've come up and brought this to opened up this topic, and we want to extract value from this moment. So we have to wonder about not just what the knowledge looks like, but what is the application of the knowledge. Unless something has been connected to the practical sectors of one's awareness or practical understanding, then in some sense it will be forgotten. Pretty much think of it this way: what you need, you don't forget. Now, the point of it here is saying that the inaccessible, obviously, we're like, yeah, man, do it's like if you are living in a poverty-stricken country. There was this video that went viral that this girl in India who was selling stuff on the street was looking out from inside like this school gyms from outside of a gym stadium, like a school gym where they were celebrating one girl's birthday. She was staring from outside looking at it. Now that's what's fascinating for me. I have learned, it took me a while. There used to be a time where I would feel sorry for beings that were inferior. And I realized that is a huge mistake and a dishonor to the value of a being. That means if you were all just physical, yeah, that would change the situation. But you're not all physical, you are all unknown forces emerging with the condition of a human. In other words, what I'm trying to tell you here is that we are looking at technology, and it's obvious that access, imagine you don't have water. Of course, accessing water that can advance the system. Pretty much everybody values what advances them, but they do not know what specifically advances them. For example, it's also based on the circumstances. That means what you if the inaccessible is valuable, then in some sense it is suggesting, okay, that if you had access you would have the value. Right now, it's so funny to me. The future generations all want Lamborghinis and want to be billionaires. They're all thinking about generating like ridiculous amounts of generational wealth. Okay. Now I find this to be amusing. Why? Because they are not realizing every person is a different DNA, is in some sense a different access point to reality. To want the same inevitable conclusion is a way of brainwashing yourself to be cloned. When I say cloned, I am not talking about physical. That era as is not upon us. It is not for now. Maybe give it like 100 to 200 years from now. Okay, where cloning can become a problem. You know, it is about figuring out what the most intelligent interaction is in the moment. But I'm trying to say that human beings are conditional entities contained in a certain manner. We are conditionalized and we also conditionalize. We are not just, it's like we are this unknown site that started off as this form, and it has no choice but to identify with this form and this format. There was no choice. Choice is a concept that was developed after. There's a level of philosophy that is so heavy, I can even say it, like for the modern, for the common man, it could be considered forbidden philosophy. Okay. But it is the philosophy that takes one's attention to questioning if before humans arrived, did everything have to be humanized? Started off identifying as a member of the human species, which I do. Sorry, guys, I need a quick break. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back, guys. Sorry, there was a quick intermission. All right. All right. So, where was I? Let's put a more livening song. All right. To speed this up, we go to the next passage. So the whole point I wanted to make that the thing is valuable because it takes an effort to gain access to it. So it's the effort. It's the effort that kind of suggests the value. The effort to access, do you know? And so we're living in a world, folks. If you haven't noticed, you should. There is a giant wall. Okay, this is how I see it. And I understand my views are uncommon, but sometimes the uncommon grow in ways it didn't know. So this is the giant wall. There's a giant wall in civilization right now. And this wall, okay, this invisible wall is between members of the human species. And I want everybody to think of it this way, regardless of your opinion, your emotions, your thoughts on yourself. Those are personal. But I will tell you, it's all about what the human being does with time. You are an energy at your core, and this energy is present within the human station. Do you know? Think of the planet as a gigantic space station. You've entered the space station, and it could be that souls are taking a break from their more intense, higher dimensional lives. And all the intensity we see on Earth could be nothing compared to higher realm intensity. It's pretty much this is like the weirdness of civilization. You're this energy, you're here for a certain time. The most valuable resource is time, but more valuable than that is what you do with your time. So, we as human beings, as members of the species on Earth, all of us can collect that human beings, like if you wanted to go buy an apple, right? You need to make money for that. You need to, in some sense, the cost of the apple is a certain currency. But now, what is the if you wanted to, let's say, get apples, right? Them. But if you wanted to make more money, why can't you go buy money? And this is very interesting. You can't go buy more money, but you can go buy more apples because the cost of money is not money. Money is the only thing on earth, not the only thing, but in a matter of speech, is the only thing on earth where its price is time. The price of money is time. What does that mean? That means you exchange time for money. You exchange your effort and energy for the vitality of your survival. But the issue is the system has been designed in such an ignorant, careless way. Do you understand? That your effort, you spend chunks of your day to attain a resource, but that attention and energy, its true impact is questionable. Okay. So when I told you there's a giant invisible wall in civilization, okay, you need to think of it this way. On one side of the wall, they're exchanging time for money. On the other side of the wall, they're exchanging money for time. There's this cool kid who goes and interviews billionaires on YouTube. He went to interview this billionaire who I think already knew who he was, or like was one of the kids, I don't know, dad's friends or something, you know. But anyways, the billionaire, right, comes up to the kid and says to the kid, "Hey, kid, do you know? Would you be willing to change bodies with me? In the sense that, would you rather have billions of dollars and be like 60, or would you rather be 20 and not have $1 billion?" And so the billionaire was teaching that kid, do you know, the lesson that it doesn't matter, like it does matter how you play this game. And and the whole point of life, believe it or not, it's about the specialization of destiny, the specification of destiny. What that means is, when I was young, do you know, I was a general being, do you know, and as the days have gone forth, do you know, I have specified more and more based on the circumstances I've gone through and the decisions I've made and how I've climbed to this moment. But why does man climb a mountain, and what do you do when you get to the mountain peak? You realize the journey, the next journey is wings. There's more to the research. I should read it. So now we go to an advanced passage, the deep structure of the idea. At its most advanced level, the value of the inaccessible reveals something deeper about human existence itself. Human beings are not objects. We are interpreters of meaning. The inaccessible represents a boundary, and boundaries define significance. What is fully accessible dissolves into the background of perception. It becomes invisible, but what resists us, what cannot be easily reached, creates tension, attention, and orientation. It pulls consciousness toward it. In this way, the inaccessible, it is structurally necessary for meaning itself. Inaccessible things act as anchors of action. They create hierarchy, direction, and movement. Without them, there is no striving, no distinction, no sense of progression. A world where everything is instantly accessible would collapse value into uniformity. Nothing would stand out, and therefore nothing would matter. At the highest level, the inaccessible may represent the unknown itself, the frontier of knowledge, identity, and existence. Humanity advances not by what it already has, but by what it cannot yet reach. The inaccessible is valuable because it creates meaning, direction, and purpose. Without something beyond reach, nothing would feel important or worth pursuing. It says the inaccessible is valuable not just because it is rare, but because it gives structure to desire, meaning to effort, and direction to human existence. So, folks, you're listening to a human being saying, "Yo, man, what if all of human psychology is based on the unknown?" That means I never thought I would, in some sense, go further ahead than any teacher I had in the educational system. I never thought And I realize why they all turn back, but I won't. There is something I got to tell the viewers. It's a story. There is this ancient Sufi story of three dervish Sufi friends. One day they wake up, in their town back in the day, like 900 years ago or something, and they see at the edge of their town is this giant random wall has appeared. Like this big wall has appeared. These three friends, they group up and they walking by the side of the wall, one of them joking, one of them fascinated, one of them being like whatever, you know and so as they're walking past this wall, they suddenly see a ladder, and these three friends instantly know what's going to happen next. Two of them go. One friend, the first friend who was curious about the wall, he goes up. Now this is an important detail in the story. Two friends hold the ladder. The first friend goes up. The first friend goes up the wall, climbs the ladder, goes up and stands at the top of the wall, and just takes one glance at what's on the other side of the wall and jumps in. Instantaneously jumps in to the other side. The two friends look at one another and they're like, "Whoa, what just happened?" Right? And so the second friend goes in. Now only one person is holding. One person is holding the ladder. The second friend goes up the wall and he looks at what's on the other side of the wall, and he realizes it is legit heaven. It is paradise. It is a divine dimension. He sees heaven, a heavenly plane. It's heaven on the other side of the wall. The second friend is about to jump. He just looks back. He just back at this third friend down, by the ladder, and says, "Yo, heaven is up here on the other side of the wall. The first friend jumped in. I'm going to jump too." The second friend jumps in. The third friend is like, "What? There's heaven on the other side of the wall?" And this is the moral of this. This is a very important point, detail in the story. Third friend, the third friend has to climb alone. But because he's a smart guy, he goes and finds these rocks to place them by the edge of the ladder on the ground, so to make it firm. And so he climbs up. He climbs up to the top of the wall and he sees that everything within him is telling him, "Go, go, jump in. You found heaven. You're complete. Go." And he does not. He's about to take a step, and right before he takes the step, he says, "Oh my God, heaven is here. A heavenly plane is beyond this wall. The world should know." And instead of jumping into heaven, he in some sense climbs down because the species deserves it as well. That is what I have been learning. When I look at this life, folks, it is all about what we bring back. The hunter gatherers have not changed. It's still hunting and gathering, but what we're hunting for and gathering has changed. To me, what's actually happening? Think of it this way. There was no consciousness, then there was the emergence of consciousness, meaning that after billions of years, from a secular lens, after billions of years, existence thought this was the cool thing to do. There's very deep arguments about how we're not just human, we're a species that is experiencing itself through 8.1 individuals. We're a collective being experiencing its individualism, or we're individuals experiencing a collective place, whichever side of whatever story works for you. But in reality, the truth is beyond stories. Mr. Within, is I thought at first it was like, just an alter ego. But then I began to realize no, it is in some sense a collective event is taking place, and this archetypal role has a destiny in it. Okay. In other words, this life generates human beings. This world is generating humans. Now, the types of human beings it generates are different. Like, think of it like a factory. This might be a kind of bizarre thing to say, but imagine that it's like a factory. Okay, and imagine that this factory is manufacturing like humans. Kind of a little bit of a dark concept, but still, you know. So it is manufacturing different products for different audiences, and we human beings do appear like a manufactured product, okay, that is being quality tested on Earth. Okay, now the mind has an ability to infinite to in an to I guess abstracticize chaos and order. So the question is, why is it manufacturing humans? Why generating this kind of power? To me, this might sound bizarre, right, guys? I'm accessing this viewpoint in a very playful way, silly way. I'm just imagining, like, if there was a higher being and it wanted to manufacture existence, and imagine it was manufacturing different products in existence. You know how we have tenders? I don't know if people know this. I worked for a company that was heading that way. And so, on some level, what it means is that different organizations are being responsible for different parts of a process. Think of it this way. Do you know? But with the whole system. So tenders has to do with governmental contracts. But anyways, when I say governmental contracts, it means that, for example, in the construction industry, for example, the government needs to build, like, I don't know, 10,000, like, I don't know, like 60,000 homes. There's tender opportunities there. But also it depends on the credibility and the status, right? The ultimate thing is that we are living in a world, folks, that you have to take time out of your, not just day, but out of your lifetime, to pause it, look at it, and ask yourself why the values of reality are interpreted as such for you. To me, I started asking myself what kinds of human beings there are on this earth. And I realized, if you divide civilization, if you sectorize it in regards to beings born to serve the past, beings born to serve the present, and beings born to serve the future, rather than everybody is in the present, using the past to give the present meaning and then heading into a future. It doesn't make sense, folks. This whole time, the human being, when you look at anything, just look in front of you right now, try to find like the sign of a store. pretty much everything we give meaning to is based on a past familiarity, and we cannot ignore the fact that the human psyche is simulating meaning. Meaning is an experiential reality, form is an existential reality. So, right now, this computer is on my lap. This computer is a form. Now, if somebody tells me what does this object mean, that meaning has to arise, has to be generated from an intelligent process. Okay, and we human beings are dumbfounded by how we cannot explain. We can explain what is in existence, but we cannot explain why existence exists. In the same way, we can use what's in the box to explain other things in the box, but we cannot use what's in the box to explain the reality outside of the box. Similarly, human beings are having an experience of a moment. We can explain the different content of our moment, but we cannot explain why we're experiencing existence. We can explain how the experience of existence happens within our moment, but we cannot explain why it's there. You see, that's the whole point of this world. We do not have access to its origin. Thing to realize in life. Okay, we are an orphaned civilization. We don't know our like, think of it this way: Mother Earth. Imagine, the human being poetically is a child of Mother Earth and Father Sky. Mother Earth can be a metaphor for the past, and Father Sky can be a metaphor for the future. And think of it this way: if you believe you're a present being, you cannot ignore the past and the future. These are access points. Okay. I have studied human uh, behavior to some degree. In my studies, I have come to the realization that human beings don't want what they want. I know this. If somebody right now wants a Lamborghini and they're imagining way, and you give them exactly that, what they're imagining, it will scare them, because we're used to attaining outer realm. Like, if you want something in your inner realms, let's say you want a Bugatti, to gain it in the outer realms requires a certain cost of time. Do you know? This is why when you suddenly give somebody a gift, right, some people can't accept gifts. Why? Because they don't, their psyche doesn't know why they deserve it. It's kind of weird why we're like that, but still. For me, I understood that, wow, civilization needs the unknown. Okay, you need the unknown there. Okay, and it's not like, yo man, you're a champion of the species because you made the unknown known. No. It's more like, why are these unknown forces? All right, guys, my laptop has 10%. What can I say? All right. I gotta go work on Mr. Within's journal after this, but I guess I will say it. I have wondered about this situation of life and I've made certain conclusions. I've realized if everybody knew everything, there would be no point in knowing. If everybody had done everything, there would be no point in doing things. And we, the human species, have to come to terms with the realization that we need the unknown to be an individual. So, in other words, a species that is searching for truth is the dissolution of your individualism, in the same way that to get closer to truth, to get closer to the original moment, to in some sense get closer to God, means that the temperatures are rising. Do you understand? And what does that mean? That means if your whole life you have lived as an ice cube, you're to realize the secrets of a liquid state. And if your whole life you have been living in a fluid manner, you will begin realizing the secrets of the gas state. And what does this mean? That means we are an intelligence that is capable of functioning and being an effort in the world unconditionally. In other words, there is one quality, one great theological clue. From the theological lens, there is a great clue about our nature, about the human nature, that there is something within us that abides by the original. There's something within us as souls, as unknown beings in the realm, that once we notice the original, we already know it. It's as if we've seen greatness and we're being tested to see if we remember it. In other words, the greatness of humanity is known. I am in no way doubt that the presence of every being on earth, in some sense, has already known what happens in the future. We cannot ignore our destiny. In the same way, I know that my body in it entered manifestation, and I also know that all simulated states, it's like just like reality was engaged from a simulated state, it will remember its originality, and its originality is the presence of that which was always beyond human, beyond all conditional forms. It is no longer just a game among humans and their own ideas. It is the presence of intelligence in an unknown world. What is the great task of man? When will the winds of advanced civilization blow away excuse me, push away the ignorance of man, the fog of ignorance? Do you know, in some sense, what is this ignorance? That in some sense, what are we exchanging if all of it is about value? Think of it this way, that all beings on earth, they're looking at this and being like, what value does it have? And it depends on if you're on your own team or not. For the longest time, I was not on my own team. Value was external to me. Value was outside. I was listening to the outer world like a naive fool that was told it was good because it was listening to it was following like a puppet, like a fool. And so from the foolishness of my youth, there arose of a higher order. In other words, there are people, they're like, Mr. Within, aren't you afraid of, like, secret, you know, metaphysics or certain esoteric traditions? And I'm like, that's child's play. Those beings that fear the conditional invisible, you have got it all wrong. We are not in the presence of interdimensional beings. We are in the presence of a great higher game. There is a higher order process, and even beings greater than man have forgotten their origin. That means even mods negate themselves. So for me, I'm like, most humans can't see it. It's not something you can see like a human. If you want to see a human, just locate their physical body. If you want to see a moderator, you got to notice how the certain sector, how space is alive before the forms enter it. There is a rhythm there. None are alone, but being alone is an incredible choice. Doesn't mean you should be alone. It doesn't mean that you should not think you're not worthy to be among others. You know, these hurdles were dealings with in my youth. Do you understand? Like, you don't let me tell you what happens, right? You think you one day just change? No. Every moment you decide, you're suggesting what quality of memory you will have. If I speak with a harsh tone, my future self has to remember this moment with that intensity. To advance civilization means to find the most advanced states in civilization. If I ask you, whoever you are listening, what is the most advanced state? The most advanced state is man discovering a power beyond free will, which this species has. The ancients kept the connection to the divine agency of this realm alive. Well done, our ancestors. But we are now, what is upon us is the battles of dehumanization. In other words, they're like Mr. Within. You talk about the great human strategy. You talk about the advanced human strategy. What is that strategy? A strategy is pretty much how you get to a vision. It's the vision, it's the destination, just like a GPS address. Okay? They're like, how do generals in a battlefield have confidence? They're like, obviously, they know. They are seeing the outcomes in their mind. In other words, the sign of leadership are those who are living fast. Only those who are living ahead of life have an advantage. The past has changed you to the familiar. The unknown is the greatest discovery. The greatest discovery is the restoration of true intelligence. In other words, in this lifetime, it's funny. Every being, every person that has seen me, they have thought I am just this physical being. They have thought all of us are physical beings, but we've been living a life behind our eyes that only we can see. And you know what religion is? Religion is realizing the source of reality started from a completed state. Therefore, we're experiencing the trends. That means the pilgrimage, or think of it this way, there's an original self, there's an original world, and in between is all the simulated realities these beings are identifying with. Biggest question is like, to the all everybody who has asked me, like, yo man, do you believe in past lives or not? I'll be like, yo man, I'm here trying to figure out if the past life of all conditional moments was an unconditional one. Think about it. What are the most important values that human beings respect? If right now we say people want the inaccessible, what is inaccessible to them? The unconditional is inaccessible to them, right? They don't, it's like it's like, why is Superman alluring? He has unconditional strength. Why is Flash alluring? Because he has unconditional speed. Why is, like, I don't know, Professor Xavier interesting? Because he has unconditional telepathy or something. And so that unconditional means at least unconditional compared to the conditions of civilization, right? But I'm saying, like, think of it this way. Even in religion, they say have unconditional love but conditional faith. Wait a minute. It should be unconditional love and unconditional faith. Isn't it weird, folks? Isn't it it's not weird, it's just a misunderstanding of civilization culture. But it's like, from one angle they're like, yo man, unconditionally love your neighbor, but at the same time they're like, conditionally have faith in God. And I've realized God is an unconditional being. The conditions are for man. If you're anything, any ideological system, it is something you're doing for yourself. Is unconditional, meaning that it is beyond a conditions approach. To discover the divine order behind every movement in the realm, to realize behind all natural laws, there is source code. And that source code is the instantaneous command. We're not in a designed, I would say we are in a commanded existence. We are not in a built, constructed existence. We're in a commanded existence. Everything we see constructed, even stretching from evolution to like a brick of a first brick of a building, you know, it's these are in some sense processes within the condition of life. In other words, what is the most fascinating thing a conditional being can do is to wonder about the unconditional, the presence of the unconditional. There's a saying, they say if you want to handle your past, you need to be responsible for it in the present. If you want to handle your present, you need to be responsible for the future, for the future, and to be responsible for the future. If you want to handle the future, you need to be responsible for that which is beyond the world. But you are not responsible for it. It's the discovery of man, of the divine agency. In the same way, when you go into a company, okay, that company already has rules and a sort of structure to it. It has an org board, right? It has, in some sense, a structure, an organizational structure to the company. Even if the employee is fired, the organizational structure is still there, right? That means intelligence, just because we don't access intelligence, doesn't mean intelligence is not there. The presence of intelligence is there. And right now, we are privileged to be a part of a system that we can interact with the system compared to any other species. Do you know there's certain things that separate us from the others? We know that we're mortal. Many species, it's very hard to say, like, why is that lion fearless? It doesn't, its experience of itself is in the present. Do you know it doesn't fathom about what's going to happen to its future? We are such advanced beings that we can imagine in the future there's going to be a disaster, and that image, that inner realm event can readjust our behavior. None of us are physical beings, okay? Because even your biological eyes act upon your inner events. What does that mean? That means if I tell you, imagine and look at something right now in front of you, you know, and if I tell you, imagine an apple like 1 meter above it, your eyes will go actually to that what you've imagined, right? So so the brain can't tell the difference. The biological eyes can't tell the difference between what is a physical phenomena and what is, let's say, a neural noumena, what is. So the brain can't tell the difference. So this is why human beings are conflicted. Do you know? In other words, we are actually living life as an ancient natural technology in an unnatural man forged system. We're living unnaturally. Me giving a talk and giving a podcast is not a natural behavior. Okay, that means I'm like this unique member of a unique of the species doing this unique thing. So in other words, we need the inaccessible to have purpose, because if we had already knew everything and done everything and were everything, there would be nothing to do. And the deeper mysteries of humanity have to do with how the presence of intelligence is prior to the human idea, is a priori. So intelligence is being present prior to the human fathoming its own intelligence, personalized as a limited to a persona. Anyways, folks, thank you for listening. Why is the inaccessible valuable? It's equivalent to saying, why is the unknown valuable? Because not only is there the rest of what we need to access is there, it's like the rest of the story is inaccessible. Like I don't know like my last moment on earth, right? My future is inaccessible, but I'm in a present which I'm giving meaning to based on the past, and you and visualize and probabilizing how that meaning can change. So it's like we treat reality like a noun. Our minds take that noun and as an invisible verb give us different views on it, different ways it can happen. So the mind is like an endless experimentation. It's like the mind is taking an object, the shape of the object, and being able to modify and shift and change that. So, in other words, we're doing this ingenious thing of taking objects, looking at taking the geometry of an object, treating it as the object in a subjective realm, in an inner realm, and then having something happen to that subject. So it is very clear the brain somehow we our consciousness can discriminate between what is an object and subject and what is an inner event and what is an outer event, but the brain can't. Okay, that means if you imagine, if you're in deep sleep and you're in a dream state, and in that dream state something like you have like something scary happens, your body is going to react like it was real. You're going to wake up from the dream panting or something, so your body can't tell the difference. Your body is reacting to the content. Okay, right? So it doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction. We are this unique instrument that treats both of them as real because there is visible content, okay, not tangible content. What distinguishes existence and existential point, let's say an existential moment from an experiential moment, okay, is that you can go and touch the existence. I can touch this laptop, but if I imagine a laptop, I have to imagine myself touching it. I can't with my physical hands touch like this laptop. I can't visualize a Bugatti on my drive it. Do you understand? So this means that the brain is treating form as real, not substance. It's treating shape as real, not its density or its mass. Do you understand? That means the brain is treating is reality as visual. Do you understand? It's not treating it as substantial. Okay, because if you look at all the senses of the human being, let's say the five major senses, only one of them is visual. Okay, and what's fascinating is if you close your eyes and somebody says like, yo bro, says the word apple, you can imagine an apple. That means your senses, your brain has delegated and chosen, in some sense, the visual sense as the most real sense, to the degree that what you hear is converted into an image, or if you taste something. So we got to understand, it's very fascinating. It's like dot, and then they drew so many different lines in it, and this whole time we've been thinking we're just the dot, and now we're realizing no, we are an intersection of various viewpoints, but these viewpoints are simulated. Why? Because that is the nature of change. Isn't it weird, in a changing world we're all trying to be specific beings? It's weird to me. It's weird to me. In an individual, they're like, yo bro, in a process try to be a person. It's like, what? They're like, who are you? It's like, where? It's like, first tell me what this is and then I'll tell you who I am. And we don't have answers. Anyways, folks, I hope this lecture was interesting. The vision keeps growing, hopefully to the degree the vision keeps advancing towards a. Of the biggest things I've realized is that They say that go make mistakes quickly. So when you make mistakes quickly, you learn from them quickly. So guess what? The species needs to make mistakes quickly. What I'm learning, right, is that we need to make mistakes together. Okay, the issue is not the mistake. Right now, world leaders are starting wars. That's a mistake. The issue is that we're not learning from them. It is learning not from the wars that human beings have been through is not human. Do you understand? It's mechanical, right? So right now, like it's weird. It's like these mechanisms are controlling emotions of world leaders in regards to how they're stylizing their psyches as an identity, right? And Mr. Within is being like, whoa, before these like little kids, sorry to say it like that, but to me, violence is childish. Why? Because the moment we had access to information, the game changed. It doesn't matter how much you can pick up a let's say a what do you call it, like a giant stick, a club, a giant wooden club, and think you're the most alpha, strongest, toughest person, but you're gonna realize the actually strong are the informed. True power is awareness to truth, to the true reality. Muslims and Christians are a force that, if they unite, they will start one of the most powerful God conscious systems in reality. If these two ideological systems unite, and the only way they can unite is through the common denominator of realizing the human access to divinity is different than divinity's access to us. In other words, God can do anything, and God is an unconditional being. It's not limited to a condition. That means I refuse to believe Christ was worshiping himself. Christ was not worshiping himself. He was saying, have faith through me. In the same way, somebody says, trust me. But they mistook that sentence, trust me, as think it's only me. You know, the thing is that what is singular in the Islamic context is triangle, is a trio in Christianity. Do you know, in Islam, for example, in Christianity, we have God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and God the Father. Okay. Now, there needed to be God the Father for there to be God the Holy Spirit, for there to be God the Son. And from one angle, it is concluded that they have one divine, that the divine nature is singular. Okay. But I'm telling you, the whole point of it is truth is beyond the world room. And if human beings can understand this, they will stop destroying each other and being like, yo, you're a completely different being than me. Then instead of like physically fighting, our subjects collaborate. What does this mean? This means that I noticed Muslims, Christians, Jews, if they talk about truth and religion, they will fight. But if you take a Muslim, a Christian, and a Jew, and you hire them as part of an architecture firm, when they're at the board meeting of that architecture firm, okay, they are not fighting. They're all politely on the same team. The issue is identity requires some sort of form, right? Human beings care for their individualism, but if you obsess over your individualism, you miss out on the collectivity. The biggest understanding is we're growing together. Nobody's been growing alone. Everything's been it's legit a garden of existence. We're like different plants. Okay, one ideological system wanting to say everybody has to be that ideological system is not true, but I understood that ideological systems are containers of experiential value. So it's the value of the experience that's more important than the specific content that's culturally accessed. In other words, prophets were called messengers. What's the point of, imagine you getting a message on your a cell phone, and instead of reading the message and understanding the message, you start worshiping your cell phone. You're like, what the do you know what I mean? Don't worship the cell phone, worship the, like, don't, the whole point of it is put your attention on really what human beings are doing. What survival is putting our attention on the most important. Pretty much beings are waking up every day, logging into this world, and they're being drawn to what is important to them. In my life personally, anything that is important to me, I suddenly find myself competent in. But when something isn't important, it's as if I'm in a different room. For the longest time, I left my, financial situation to the divine, right? But then I realized on some level, okay, it depends on what needs to be built. There has to be blueprints, there has to be a system, there has to be a strategy. Now I'm realizing that in some sense, the inaccessible is important. Think of even people getting to know each other in dating, right? It's all about that the one who is more inaccessible is more important. Why? Isn't that funny? The inaccessible is made important to us, but it doesn't necessarily mean just because something is inaccessible, it is true. Okay, just because there is something we don't know yet that is profound doesn't mean that is like what we need. Do you know what I mean? We have to, on some level, start accessing species level consciousness. That means throughout the day, don't think about, like, yo, man, what am I doing today? Think about, what is my species doing today? Think about, what problems am I solving for myself? Think about how I solve those problems, that it no longer happens for the species. I'll give you an example, very simple. Somebody is walking into a coffee shop, there's people entering it, this person holds the door open and realizes hordes of people are entering, and he has to hold the door open. He goes and he notices there's a small stone or something beside it, he puts it in front of the door, and then he enters and he advances to the next stage. So the point of it was, he experienced the problem to solve it. If you are living a life here and there's stuff that happens to you you don't understand, or you have problems you don't understand, because from a species level perspective, maybe you are the rare soul that has to go solve that problem and solve it in a way that it advances everybody to move up and level up their problems. That means they don't have that problem anymore. And granted, some things can teach, some things you can't. You can try as hard as you want, you can't. There needs an experiential reality. I firmly believe in that there is destiny. I believe that to an unconditional being, everything has already happened. To us as conditional beings, like, the future's left. Anyways, there's more to say always, but there's also a need to realize that just because the inaccessible is more valuable doesn't mean the present moment is not valuable. There is so much we haven't accessed from what we already have, or from what we are. Become fascinated in everything, including yourself again. So become fascinated again with all of this, and wonder truly, how many different ways are there? Most people are just basing it on their own inner realms. Anyways, thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced, in honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to, in the presence of the system admin,